It's the Monday Morning Show. Today is October 19th, 2018. I'm Ken LaSalle from kenlasalle.com, and it's time for another installment of DC Home. But before we get into that, a little housekeeping. I want you to know that in creating DC Home, I've used Garrison Keillor's News from Lake Wobegon out of the Prairie Home Companion as a starting point. But you'll soon notice a few changes and should probably expect a few more. My goal is to make this into my own thing while also paying some small tribute to the great work of Mr. Keillor. I also want to let you know that there are a few giveaways for my new book, Maxed Edge in the Time of the Uniborg, going on right now. You can find out more on my Facebook page and Twitter feed. Just look me up by my name, Ken LaSalle, or Google Maxed Edge, D-E-D-G-E, to find them there. You can also pick up Maxed Edge in ebook and paperback from Amazon, etc., etc., etc. And with that, and with my apologies to Mr. Keillor, let's get on with the show. Well, it has been a quiet week in Washington, D.C., out there on the edge of the country. Lessons are in the process of not being learned, as usual. Elizabeth Warren took a DNA test, which so many people are doing these days, to prove her Native American ancestry. Trump had told her he'd pay $1 million to the charity of her choice could she prove such a claim. And so, she proved it, falling into the usual trap that Democrats fall into of believing Republicans can act like human beings and honor their word. But we know better, don't we? I think Senator Warren must have hesitated for just a minute before taking that DNA test, because she knows that we, as a nation, are in a moment when we need to be less divided and less differentiated. We need to be less tribal and come together as a community of citizens to help heal our nation and heal our world. But the temptation to stick it to Trump must have just been far too irresistible. And like most temptations, when we succumb to them, it blew up in plenty of faces. Certainly far too many to keep quiet. The controversy, I think that's what they're calling it, controversy, tiff, flack, contention. Social media was sprayed with it with the same consistency and clumpiness one might expect from diarrhea. And like that malady, the waste kept demanding attention unexpectedly in lunchrooms and Starbucks and a little bar tucked into the back of a dirt brown building in the back of Georgetown in Washington, D.C. The bar was called Freedom Fried, but not intentionally. The proprietor, a youngish-looking woman named Sherry Finn, found the previous name just so absurd. It used to be called Freedom Fields, and Sherry Finn knew there used to be fields in Georgetown, but not since the 1800s. She thought she'd knock off the S and call the place Freedom Field. But she knocked off far more than the S. And with the letters that remained, she could have named the joint Freedom Fired, or turn the F upside down and make... But she stuck with Freedom Fried. It sounded ironic. And besides, they had a deep fryer for appetizers. Sherry Finn recently inherited Freedom Fried from her brother-in-law, who had hired her after his father had passed away. The bar had been in his family for 2 generations. Blake, Sherry's brother-in-law, ran Freedom Fields like his own personal ATM. But Sherry didn't concern herself with that, as long as she had a job. Then, one weekend in Las Vegas, Blake and Sherry's only sister, her only living family, left this world in a hail of unfinished or just plain neglected, because who dies when they're 45 anyway, wills. Left Sherry Freedom Fields, not because they wanted to, but because Sherry was the only family who could be bothered with the funerals or with Sean, the young boy left behind as a victim of Vegas. Oh, there were plenty of family members calling to ask about Freedom Fields and the value of the property, what would happen to the assets after they were sold off, and possibly what money Sherry's sister and her husband might have left in the bank. But they were quickly disappointed and never heard from again. Once Sherry told them there was no money. Blake had spent it like a shallow pool of dirty water. Freedom Fields didn't own the building they were in, and, oh, by the way, who was taking Sean? Turned out, nobody had any answers. Sherry was left with nothing but questions and a bar she never wanted to run, but had to if she wanted to remain employed. And Sean. A 13-year-old boy and a 42-year-old woman who hated kids. Okay, she didn't hate kids necessarily, but every bit of loathing she held towards children was given to her, thanks to that particular 13-year-old. Orange hair and lumbering body, the kid was built like a poorly designed truck. And could that kid swear? His parents had never taught him about self-censoring or having a filter. If he had something bad to say about you, he'd say it to anyone who would listen. Which was probably why Sherry took such an interest in Freedom Fried. She paid a local artist she knew and had recently stopped sleeping with to paint an appropriate icon they dreamed up on the front door. The American flag made of French fries. Thought it might help business. But Sherry never witnessed any sign that it did, or that anyone noticed any change at all. The new name, the new proprietor, the last one who died. Nothing. They just kept coming in at night, getting drunk, and fighting. Nowadays, it was mostly fighting. Men would come in after 6 with fighting words shouted as they walked through the front doors, calling the Republicans heartless bastards for caging children, shouting down Democrats who only wanted open borders and surrendered sovereignty, and on and on. Sherry couldn't take it most nights. She'd never heard grown men prattle on so much. But something has happened to men recently, in the past decade or so. I don't know if you've noticed it. Men are now the Scarlett O'Haras of their own lives. They don't know what that means exactly. Most of them have never even seen the film. I haven't seen it. I don't want to see it. But men have become these dainty little flowers. Nobody gets offended like a man. Nobody can be appalled quite like a white man. Our time has come. We left all the hard work to the women, and we're spending the rest of our time being offended at how a sexual predator Supreme Court justice could possibly be questioned. Or at how the president should be able to talk Saudi arms deals like it was a cattle trade and nothing more, because that's free speech, damn it. And Sherry Finn had to listen to deafening levels of free speech every night. She couldn't afford a bouncer. She just had Bob at the bar to cut people off when they'd had too much, or when he was sure they'd pass him a $20 bill for just one more. That left Sherry to do most of the bouncing herself. So when Chuck Schumer threatened to break a bar stool over Mitch McConnell's, let's call it a head, Sherry had to step in. Not because she was afraid of losing a chair, but because she knew that a call to emergency services wouldn't get an ambulance there fast enough before Schumer's wails of pain at throwing his back out chased all of her other customers down the street. She had to watch her door when the hour grew late just in case Donald Trump was cruising the streets. Trump has a reputation for not drinking, and another reputation for trying to score coke from every bar bathroom in the metropolitan D.C. area. And when Trump scores coke, trouble often follows, as anyone who watched the presidential debates can attest. And it's not enough to get him his coke and send him on his way, because then the hookers follow, and the lobbyists, and the evangelical preachers. And before you know it, nobody's drinking. Sherry's lost all of her profits for the night, and next thing you know, Pat Robertson is standing on a table. Truth be told, it's been a while since Pat has stood on a table without a great deal of help, but surely he'd be standing on something or somebody, waving his Bible, talking about how the rapture needs to come, and so does he, and do any of the hookers have any psilocybin he can lick off of their, let's say, hands? But I'm happy to say that Sherry's week has gone better than she expected. Oh, sure, there was one fight she simply wasn't big enough to break up. It was Brett Kavanaugh coming in for his bucket of beer, shouting at the top of his lungs about the guy who wanted to prove he was an Indian. "I got a great one for you guys," he said, knocking down 3 congressmen with his breath. "There's this white guy who thinks he's an Indian. An Indian. Like from Indiana. That's a state, right?" Brett Kavanaugh didn't know that Elizabeth Warren was in the house, quietly eating her Irish nachos. And by that time, she'd had enough. She'd lived through a week of rumors and lies and whatever it was Trump was doing. She had taken decisive action to make sure nobody could malign her background any longer, forgetting that the Republican Party didn't need help being malignant. And then Brett Kavanaugh came in, perpetually drunk and groping any man, woman, or child within reach. Always indignant when anyone told him to stop. "I'm a white man," he'd shout. A white man just like the rest of you. I have rights. I know, because I made sure in court that nobody else could have them." Elizabeth Warren is known for her calm and her mastery of the issues, but this time she just took her unfinished Irish nachos and hurled them at Brett Kavanaugh's head, forgetting that his head is his most useless appendage. If 14 gallons of Schlitz won't take him down, a clay bowl wasn't going to make a dent. And if it did, Kavanaugh wasn't going to feel it. Fortunately, the blow knocked Kavanaugh into a red Solo cup filled with Coors Light, the Kavanaugh homeland. So Sherry was able to take that cup and steer him out by simply holding the cup under his nose. Kavanaugh tried grabbing at the cup, but slipped his hand under Sherry's top and over her brassiere instead. Small price to pay for getting rid of Brett Kavanaugh, I think we can all agree. Elizabeth Warren couldn't have been happier. She even offered to buy Sherry a beer. Sherry thanked her, as was only polite, but had to remind the senator that she still couldn't serve her alcohol of any kind. She probably shouldn't have added, "I've heard your people don't take very well to the booze." Elizabeth Warren just can't catch a break. And for now, at least, that's the news from Washington, D.C., where all the women are wrong, all the men are crooked, and all the children are screwed.